Hello, and welcome to episode 8 of From the Vault. My name's Dan, and with me tonight I've got Nathaniel, as usual. How you doing?
I'm doing okay. The From the Vault that corresponds to this week's episode is Angels, which I don't think has anything to do... Last week we did talk about how good Blue White was, which sort of is like on the same wavelength as Annihilation.
Right.
Because, Blue White runs... Board sweepers.
I mean, I guess Lyra's a good angel.
That's true. Lyra is a good angel.
We are going to talk about Lyra today.
We're not going to talk that much about Lyra. We're going to be hey, everyone's adapted to Lyra. Spoilers.
You don't have to play it anymore.
Yeah. Well. So, yeah, alright. That's the connection. I feel like next one's going to be real... next week is going to have a real hard time connecting to the From the Vault.
I shares of no idea what these are. We've also skipped the first few because we only started doing this bit in episode 7.
That's true.
So I'm not sure. We're definitely going to run out as well.
Oh yeah, we're going to run out real soon, but it's okay. We'll just stop doing the bit then, probably.
But we are doing weekly releases now, and
yeah.
we have kept to that for 3 weeks in a row.
We have,
which I think that's a miracle, genuinely, because I think we were on once every 2 months before then.
Yeah,
so
not quite.
Vast improvement.
Not quite lightning paced content release right there.
No. But yeah, so for anyone that's tuning in for their first episode, and all of that was just a lot of drivel and nonsense, we
settle in, because that's what we got.
That's what we got. Plenty more in the tank. We're From the Vault, the podcast from Murphy's Vault in Edinburgh. And today, we're going to talk about Standard and Legacy. So we had a couple of Standard PPTQs last weekend. Yes. I made one of 2 of them. We had Paisley in Commie Crazy on the Saturday, and then West End Games in Glasgow on the Sunday. We both played Black White Vehicles.
Yes, we both played Black White Identity Crisis.
Identity Crisis. The list changed from Saturday to Sunday. So let's talk about Saturday first. Paisley. So, best thing about Paisley is the Vietnamese food, right?
Oh yeah, that was by far the best bit of the day. Me and Dan were both dead. So we went to a Vietnamese place and got crab rice. Yeah. And if you ever have the opportunity to go to this Vietnamese place, Dan, what was the name of the Vietnamese place?
It's called Little Hanoi, Scotland. They might be moving premises, but if you Google them, they've got a Facebook page and everything. Lovely fella from Hanoi that owns the place, and excellent food.
Yeah, their crab rice is really, really good. If you have the opportunity, go and get their crab rice.
Get the crab rice.
Do it.
They also do Vietnamese spring rolls. For anyone who's not aware, so my mother's Vietnamese. I've got Vietnamese family. So Vietnamese spring rolls are very near and dear to my heart. 10 times better than any other spring roll. Guaranteed. Absolutely guaranteed. So we had good food. Also, Commie Crazy has a new venue, or new shop, and it's really nice. Not that the old one wasn't nice.
It was just a little small.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's pretty standard for a lot of magic shops. You find that the venue is actually quite small, especially when they're starting out, because you can't afford that big of a place. Mm-hmm. And especially if your idea is, I'm going to be a comic / magic / nerd store, you don't imagine you'll need that much space, and so you go for the place you can afford, and then you kind of realize that there's money to be made in selling drinks and snacks, and that if you want to run these bigger events, then you need space to run them in. And so lots of them end up moving into more bigger cafe style locations. Mm-hmm. But Comic Crazy's new location is actually really, really nice.
It's really nice.
I could see spending time and enjoying myself if I lived in Paisley, which I don't, unfortunately. Or maybe
the one knock on it is that the previous venue was right across the road from Little Hanoi, whereas that now you have to walk for 15 minutes. So that's, that's a that's a knock.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if it our customers can go somewhere else to eat food easily, or we could have a nicer venue. I don't know, man. It's really hard.
No, it's
running a business is so complicated.
Definitely positive for them. We should talk about Magic. So Black White Vehicles. We played a version which I don't have the exact 75 on me anymore because I've been tinkering with it on the same kind of deck list on Goldfish, but we were playing namely what we've kind of what we moved away from afterwards was the card Seal Away. In a number of 1 to 2. I was on 1, you were on 2, I think.
Yeah.
An Ethersphere Harvester, which we only had a single one because we were already pretty down on the card. More on that later. And we had main deck Lyra Dawnbringers, which I actually think was okay for last weekend based on kind of the ebb and flow of Standard. Perhaps not for the room we were in. Just based on...
Yeah, to give a brief overview of, like, I guess I find it impossible to talk about the decks in Standard without talking about like where they've come from, because so many of the decisions that drive them.
Before we go, let's just give a quick brief on what Black-White Vehicles is.
But that's what I'm saying. Like that's
sure.
I think it's impossible to discuss what it is without talking about the rest of the format and the way the rest of the format has developed.
Absolutely,
because like it started off with everyone just being like, "Huh, Steelleaf Champion and Chain Whirler are really good," and like. You just hit people and make them dead. And then people were like, oh, but you know what's really good against those cards? Like things that cost more than like 2 or more mana that have to attack to be good. Seal Away. That card's really good against them. And then in addition, also good against the green decks is like Fumigate, Settle the Wreckage. And then Settle the Wreckage also happens to be good against the red decks. So people then start playing like Seal Away white decks. Varying levels of like blue-white mid-range, to blue-white control, to like some like mono-white aggro decks, which also kind of popped up early on, but I think were kind of kept down a little bit early by how powerful Chain Whirler was from the red decks. So then blue-white control starts to become good, and blue-white in general starts to become a very strong archetype. So Black-White Vehicles was kind of the next shift. Was like, okay, so just playing mono-white doesn't really get you there. Your creatures still have to attack to get through. You're still kind of bad against Settle the Wreckage and Fumigate. And all your stuff still dies to Seal Away. So Black-White is like taking the idea that Seal Away is the best removal spell in the format and trying to abuse that by playing almost exclusively creatures that are not bad against Seal Away. So cards like Heart of Kiran, cards like Khan, and the big one obviously that people hadn't really thought about being Knight of Malice, because hexproof from white is very relevant when all your opponents are playing white removal. With the idea being that like you play Toolcraft Exemplar and Heart of Kiran and Scrapheap Scrounger and Knight of Malice and History Benalia, and those things let you kill your opponents quickly if they are not trying to kill you. But also a lot of those like some of those cards can pivot, and then you're also playing cards like Fatal Push and Cast Out and Khan, Scion of Urza, that let you pivot back into a more control role. The more I've played this deck and the more I've looked at the format, this deck is basically Jund.
Yeah, for sure. It's a mid-range deck which can pivot nicely, both in post-board kind of configurations as well as mid-game, based on the cards, and similarly to Jund, which we kind of touched on when you said Black-White Identity Crisis. You sometimes get some sort of 6-card hands where you're like, well, I think I have to keep this in the dark, and you have drawn entirely the wrong part of your deck against an unknown opponent and are very, 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 very unlikely to win.
Yeah, that is. So my biggest current knock against the deck is the game 1 mulliganing. You have such polarizing hands. You have hands with, like 1 threat, 2 or 3 removal spells, a Khan, the rest is lands, and you're like, oh, this is really good if my opponent is also playing creatures. It's really bad if they're not. And then your opponent plays an irrigated farmland and you lose.
That's what I miss of... So this is what I miss from playing Chandra decks. Chandra is in a good spot, because even if... I mean, it's not the best sometimes against certain kinds of creatures and the like, but it's always got a use. And if you're playing against control, you're obviously very happy. And sometimes a 4 mana, deal 4 damage to a creature was sort of fine. And yeah, I miss playing Chandra, basically. I
mean, like, Chandra is still a very respectable choice in the metagame, I think.
Absolutely.
We're playing white-black vehicles because, personally, I I mean, I may have spoken about this last week. I don't know if anyone remembers that, but I find playing Control Mirrors to be an incredibly demoralizing experience and just not how I want to spend my time. And additionally, I hadn't had that much success with Control Online, whereas I had more success with White Black in the weeks leading up to the PPTQ. Also, so this is an important thing to filter every statement that at least I say in regards to anything to do with local Scottish events, which is that Scotland really loves playing control decks.
Yep.
In general. And if there is a viable control deck, then it will be half the room at any given Scottish PPTQ. Which I think there's some interesting stuff behind that, but we won't go into it now because it's a bit irrelevant. But basically, yeah.
Yep. There's a lot of blue-white in the room.
Yeah, if you don't want to play Control Mirrors, don't play Control in Scotland, because you will play Control Mirrors.
And come with a plan.
Yeah, on Sunday, I faced Irrigated Farmland 4 times out of 5. That's
mental.
They weren't all Control. Sometimes they were like the mid-rangey versions, or like I played in Cycling at one point. But yeah, people really like playing Control decks when they can.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, tournament itself, as we've sort of touched on, wasn't particularly successful. I lost to Stephen Murray, who was playing Blue-Red Wizards. I'm pretty sure I died on turn 4 twice.
That was great.
That was
not
really
you
great.
Losing, but like
no, the deck was great. It was phenomenal.
So, I mean, the deck is interesting. Stephen Murray played a different deck on Sunday that he had less success with, so I don't know if he's going to go back to the Wizards or not. Stephen Murray, for anyone who doesn't know, is a very good Scottish player. He played... No, he wasn't team captain last year, but he played at... He represented us at the World Magic Cup last year and has done, I think, several times.
Many times in a row.
He's played on the Pro Tour several times. He's also just a real nice guy. Shout out to Stephen for killing Dan on turn 4 twice.
Yeah, boy. I got reduced to rubbled. It was horrible. For anyone that doesn't know, reduced to rubble is 2
it's it's expensive mana leak, and then it means your lands don't untap.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened, and then I died.
Yeah, it's really good when you're ahead. Have I resolved that card in Constructed? I don't think I have.
And then
Did I play it in like a Mardu deck?
Potentially one of your Mardu blue decks.
I loved Mardu.
I think you would have just played Metallic Rebuke though, surely.
Almost.
And then
certainly.
Negate. Like, I don't know.
Almost certainly. I mean, buddy, I would have played Spell Queller before either of those cards.
Sure, okay. So you probably haven't, is the point.
Yeah.
Other losses include I played against Duncan Tang. He was on Blue-White Gift. We had some good games. I think I kind of punted one of the games. It was kind of difficult to retrace footsteps. It was a really long affair. But yeah. So that was me out of contention. And then, yeah, we went and got Vietnamese food. And Andrew and Holt both made top 8. Members of the team, for anyone who's not familiar. This was particularly good for Holt because I think this is his first Magic event in so long.
Yeah, he didn't play any of last season because he was getting married.
Yeah.
He is now married, so he's playing events again.
Magic. So he's back, and so I'm happy to see him get a top 8 in his first event. And then Andrew did really well, went on to the final, and then lost to Harry from Team Weg. So I should be clearer, maybe call him Martin Porter, but anyway.
Maybe.
So yeah, shout outs to Harry. Good job, man. So we touched on the changes that we made from kind of Saturday to Sunday. Although I didn't play on Sunday, we sat down at the Vietnamese place and kind of talked about our tournament, what cards were bad, what we wanted to play, etc. So we cut Ethersphere Harvester. Let's start with that. I hated playing that card. I really, really did. And I'm happy that it's out of
Dan
our
hates
out of this
3
deck.
power flyers. That's why I refuses to play Delver in Legacy.
So the play patterns with it were usually I'm on defense against a red deck. This card's supposed to be good. I'm going to crew now and get abraded before blocks. or the patterns against the other white decks were, I'm going to crew this with my usually more than one power creature, because so the deck plays all these creatures that has to crew Heart of Kieran, and gone are the days of Thraben Inspector and the like, and the most likely kind of partner in crime for Harvester was a Ballista on one. You're not getting much damage out of crewing it with a Knight of Malice or anything, so the choice was often don't, or going back to what I was going to say, which is crew it, swing, and get sealed away. The play patterns were really not good for the deck. I'm not saying that Aethersphere is a bad card. I think that particularly out of the red-black decks, which I do want to touch on a little bit later, I think the card is still a decent sideboard option, potentially. But I do not want to play it in this black-white deck, certainly not in the main. And I don't even have it in the sideboard anymore, to be quite honest, but I think it's maybe more defensible there, but I
think if it's anywhere, it's a sideboard card. But like you say, yeah, what I found with Aethersphere Harvester was that the card is itself still actually, I think, quite strong in the metagame, but the way it played in the deck wasn't very good. You'd work so hard to make their sealaways dead, so then you played a card that they got to seal away, that you had to tap a creature to attack with.
Yeah.
And then you work so hard to have 3-power creatures to crew Heart of Kieran, so you play this 3-power vehicle that that gets crewed by 1-power creatures, but you don't have many of those. It really only come from like Ballista or
Khan.
Or Khan, yeah, and none of those situations are particularly exciting, especially because like if you have a Khan, you can crew your Heart of Kieran. If you have one of them.
Boy. So Heart's great. Oh my god.
Yeah, Heart is a good card.
2-mana Sarah Angel. Very, very good.
2-mana Sarah Angel remains a strong card. But yeah, I personally felt that Aethersphere Harvester just didn't... I also just felt like it didn't do the things you wanted to do in the deck. It didn't advance your game plan very much.
Yeah. I think my one concern...
in exclusively the red matchup, where it like helped you be more controlling and gain you life and have a good blocker. But, at the same time, that's not the function of a main deck card, to be good in one matchup and bad in all others.
And but the thing about that, though, particularly about what we just touched on there against the red decks, is that it's actually a really bad sideboard card, because post-board, the red deck is going to have all of its abrades. Like, pre-board, you can maybe catch them out, and I'm not disagreeing with you. It's obviously not a good main deck card. My point is it's not even a really good sideboard card here. It's obviously very good against them. I want to reiterate that because it's stressed a little bit.
Like it's good. Yeah, they bring in all their braids
and
for a reason.
Yeah, and the Heart of Kieran's and everything. It's just the patterns when they do have a braid. The play patterns are just abhorrent. So the one concern going into the tournament for me personally was artifact count, and I hadn't tested enough to say. I can confidently say that I want to cut all of my Aetherspheres, and I will have enough artifacts for my Toolcraft exemplars and my Khans. Based on sort of further testing and our new list, which we'll get to in a minute after we talked about all the kind of tweaks, I don't think that Aethersphere Harvester should be seen play in these decks anymore. And if you are still playing it, I would cut it. Unfortunately, this episode will probably come out after Birmingham. But if you've got any more tournaments and stuff coming up and things like that, and it's still on your list, I'd really, really highly consider getting it out of there.
I think most people haven't adjusted black-white to where it should be now. I think at the moment, everyone is still just playing like cards that are good against red, because I think you're playing like half of your cards are good against red and half of your cards are good against control. And B, I don't know. I just think you haven't like worked the deck down to a point. People haven't figured out exactly what the game plan is. They're still kind of like, it's just kind of good cards, and it is sort of that. But you still have to have like an overall plan with your good cards, especially in game one.
Things really need to mesh together. So that's Aethersphere. Let's talk about Lyra, because.
Lyra is very definitely the most powerful card that we decided to stop playing in our main deck.
Sideline, yeah. So it's to be clear, it's still on our sideboard, and I absolutely I must stress it has to be in your 75. The card is simply just, as Nathaniel sort of said, just too good on rate. Baneslayer Angel's a good Magic card. Surprise.
Yeah,
but
Baneslayer Angel's really good. It's also really good with Walking Ballista. Those two cards work really well together. Because Walking Ballista pumping the power of your first strikers effectively is pretty strong. And yeah, just in general, like the card is very strong against the matchups where it's strong. The problem is that those matchups are kind of adapted, so you couldn't just like shove 2 Lyras in your main deck and be like, haha, I'm good against red. Mm-hmm. You had to have a bit more of a developed plan. But also, like, it's so mopey in the matchups where it's not good.
Yep. It's because, really, really just... Ugh.
Again, against Blue-White Control and other like mid-rangey versions of it, you've worked so hard to make their Seal Aways dead, and then you play a 5-mana creature that they can seal away.
It's horrible.
And like, people have started playing Unlicensed Disintegration again, and some people are playing Fight with Fire again because they need to kill Lyras.
This is it's not just the decks where it's good, where it was good. Well, it still is good. It's not just a deck where it's good that are adapting. It's the meta as a whole. I mean, the card's been dominating the first few weeks of this standard. I mean, absolutely, and rightly so. As we said, it's goddamn powerful, and it's just everywhere. You know, you've seen a lot of winning deck lists playing white, playing 2 to 3 Lyras across their 75, and that's been a consistent showing. So again, it's not just these decks like the red decks that are playing Fight with Fire that are adapting. The format as a whole is knows what it's trying to target. And the target is Lyra Dawnbringer.
Yeah, people are playing Ravenous Chupacabra in their non-Godfarer's gift lists.
I'm scared of... So let's talk about that deck real quick while we're talking about Lyra and why we've wanted to sideline it. So there's a green-black Constrictor deck which is making waves. It won the Team Open in Baltimore. Make what you will of team tournament data, but the deck is good. The main kind of new engine piece that it's gained since the previous standard is Adventurous Impulse. For anyone that's not aware, it's sorcery for green. Look at the top 3 cards of your library. You may reveal a creature or land card from among them, put it into your hand, put the rest on the bottom of your library in any order.
Oh, it is Nissa, how the mighty have fallen.
Yes, but Oath of Nissa combined with Chupacabra is really, really good when you want to kill Baneslayer Angels.
It's not just combined with Chupacabra. The idea is that it's also combined with Winding Constrictor, Glintleaf Siphoner, Thrashing Brontodon, Verdurous Gear Hulk, Walking Ballista. Did I mention that one? I don't think I mentioned that one. Basically, these decks play a very varied and versatile creature suite that Adventurous Impulse allows them to like kind of filter through, is the idea.
It's about half the deck is about creatures. And yeah, Impulses, the Adventurous Impulse is really good here. So I'm kind of scared of this deck going into the weekend. My intention is not to play standard at all because we are both playing the Legacy, and we're both hoping to day 2. So yeah, hopefully we don't have to worry about this. But in the event that we do, this deck is a little bit concerning. But I think that making adaptations like moving Lyra to the sideboard are good. I also think that what that makes way for in the main deck, which do you want to talk about Lyra anymore? Have we covered it?
I feel like Lyra is well covered.
Yeah. Also, yeah, you mentioned Unlicensed Integration out of the red-black deck. Let's do a quick deck review after we've talked about our changes. We get to play 4 Khan. 4 Khan is great. And talking about artifact count, Khan's an artifact, basically, in terms of, in
that he literally makes one, yeah.
Yeah. It's strong. I think that that's obviously going to be a good card against these kind of decks.
Yeah, Khan is your friend in grindy matchups.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, turns out the Planeswalker whose card advantage and board presence takes over a game is good when that's what the game's about.
Mm-hmm. And these decks are, they're Vraska decks, obviously.
Yeah. Also, like, having played the deck online and played against it online, it also can be soft game 1 to just, like, curving out with Toolcraft Hearts and Histories. Not necessarily exactly those cards in that order, but, like, I lost a match to an opponent who just like on the play just went like history on turn 3, history on turn 4, history on turn 5, and obviously that's kind of a nutty draw. But it just puts you like the deck doesn't have that many good reactive ways of playing from behind, except for Chupacabra in the main deck certainly. So it really wants to be on the play and aggressively like hitting its opponent.
Because it's playing
putting
Impulse.
them under pressure.
Because it's playing Impulse, and as a 4 this deck is barely playing any interaction. I mean, the deck is like 50% creatures, most like, 23 to 24 lands, usually 23, I think, because it's playing Llanowar Elves.
Yeah.
And then they're playing, that doesn't leave a lot of room for interaction.
Yeah, there's no fatal pushes in their main deck. So you're kind of in a situation with the deck where if you're on the play and you have like a good start, which isn't uncommon, then it's very hard to like stop you. But if you're on the draw, your opponent has if you're on the draw, I mean, Bronzodon for Heart is not like an exciting way to regain tempo in a matchup that has become about that.
Absolutely,
because you spent 4 mana to deal with their 2, and it's probably hit you for 8 before you got the chance to do this. Like the deck is also kind of soft to just fumigate. Its entire game plan is put men on board, make men big, make people dead, and it does make the biggest men. Nobody makes bigger men than it, except maybe the mono green decks. Yeah, except Galta decks. They also can make big men. But luckily, you play Ravenous Chupacabra, which is a very good card against Galta. And Vraska and Vraska's Contempt, which we talked about how like you don't have that much good interaction, but you do kind of have good interaction for individual big things. Yeah.
Couple contempts usually.
Yeah. So the deck is very good at its game plan and making men big, which is good against like a good amount of the metagame right now. But it is quite soft to the blue-white control decks. So if those are still kicking quite hard, I can imagine being a little bit concerned about playing straight green-black at the weekend.
If you are going to play green-black, I mean, I do think that you should be playing about 2 Fatal Push, personally. Again, the card was pretty criminally underplayed a few weeks ago, but it's still just not... It's just not getting the sort of recognition in some of these lists, in my opinion. The one that won the Team Open was playing 1 Fatal Push, but I digress. Let's talk about its plan versus Fumigate, because it's playing Lifecrafter's Bestiary, which is a card that we've seen in the past. And obviously, the plan here is that between Duress, Lifecrafter's Bestiary, and Vraska, it can tackle these decks. Yeah,
I mean, like obviously that's what you're doing. Sure. I think that the fact that you're playing these cards obviously tells you that you're weak to Fumigate, because you have to make big concessions to the sorts of decks that do that. And I still imagine that Blue-White is a hard matchup, even with these tools. But they do allow you to win
good
games
against you.
Yeah, Seal Away is very good. I mean, so it can be and it cannot be, because you have Walking Ballista and Winding Constrictor, which together can actually be against very slow control decks, which is what a lot of them are. Like the ones that are totally cutting win conditions, you're like, okay, buddy, I will sit here and I will put 2 counters on my Walking Ballista for every 4 mana I have.
And I'm not going to swing into your Settle or your Seal Aways.
Yeah, and I will kill you.
It's a thought.
I do think that Walking Ballista is actually kind of a tough card for a lot of the blue-white decks to handle, outside of stuff like Teferi, which doesn't really deal with it very well because you trade your entire Teferi for their Ballista, and Fumigate and Cast Out. And when you're answering a Walking Ballista with those things, and when those are your answers, none of them cost less than 4 mana, so it's not exactly an exciting place to be. So Walking Ballista, I mean, one of the reasons why it sees so much play, and it sees play in an enormous number of lists, one of the reasons it sees so much play is because it is currently very well positioned to play with most of the good cards of the format.
It's the most played. It's the most played card in Standard right now.
I think so, yeah.
Oh no, I think there's numbers on that. I can't.
Well, there were numbers on that at the PTQ,
right,
online. But like, it's hard. Obviously, it's hard to say that within like leagues because we don't have any of that data.
Yeah. Okay. So, at any rate, that's the green-black deck. That's where we're cutting Lyra. We're also playing 3 Fumigates in our sideboard at the moment, just purely based on this and the mono green deck. And I don't know. I think it's a good spot. It's a good time to be fumigating at the moment.
Yeah, it also just fits in well with how I think the deck wants to play, which is to take a relatively aggressive bent game 1, because if you win the die roll and you just go like Toolcraft Heart, like scrounge your Toolcraft, your opponent's like, oh no, I am dying, please stop hitting me with a Sarah Angel, and then they die. And it doesn't really matter what their plan was if you get to like kill them. I will talk a bit more about this in a little bit, because I actually want to discuss that and some of my doubts about the deck in some ways. But that's the I think the ideal way that deck plays is game 1, you play relatively aggressively, and if you draw the removal spells to line up to your opponent's aggressive draw, then you draw them. But you're not really playing any card selection, so it's hard to like adjust your draw, really. And then games 2 and 3, you look to your sideboard to adjust who you are in the matchup. So, my opponent's playing control. Well, out go all these removal spells, and in come all of these duresses. Argles, Bloodfasts,
treasure maps, all that kind of good
treasure
stuff.
Maps, ways of generating advantage, but overall we're still just looking to kill our opponent. And my opponent is playing green. Okay, well, I don't want to be a Toolcraft Exemplar deck against a green deck.
I also think that
Toolcraft Exemplar isn't a very good card against a green deck, because all their creatures get bigger than him, and like they win that kind of like ground fight. And just in general, I'm not interested in these low impact cards, especially in post-board games where things are often fought over much bigger kind of stakes. So let's just not be that kind of deck anymore. Let's be a Fumigate deck now.
I mean, I think that outside of the control matchup, you're cutting Toolcraft so much.
Yeah, the card is the epitome of a game 1 card. It's very good to turn 1 on the play Delver of Secrets. He's not quite Delver of Secrets. He's more Wild Cattle. But like that's kind of the clear thing of like, okay, it's very good turn 1 on the play to play a 3-power attacker.
For sure.
That's great. In the dark, in general. It's also very good against control. But game 2, there's a lot of situations where you don't want to be playing Toolcraft Exemplar turn 1 on the play. So you don't want him.
Absolutely. So, last adaptation, which we touched on, was cutting Seal Away. I just kind of want to briefly go over this because I think that people are already sort of coming around to this. The card is very easy to play around. It's also just not at all what...
It's not on plan.
It's just not the plan at all. You know, you need to, like, going back to what you just touched on in terms of game 1 plans and everything, you know, we're a Toolcraft deck game 1, and you don't...
Toolcraft decks generally are attacking into their opponent, and their opponent is leaving up blockers.
Exactly.
So if your removal spell that usually you're staring at is like, oh, this does not deal with their blocker, and then your opponent starts swinging, but generally they'll have started swinging because they'll have started winning. Because they'll have like killed your creatures and stabilized. And removing their creature at that point might win you some games, but most of the time it's actually just going to mean that you lose because you didn't have a card to advance your actual game plan. And you just played into their game plan of, I am going to trade resources until I am ahead.
Yep. And I think it was a concession to red and not really understanding how the deck is supposed to function.
Yeah, I think it was also a thing of, Seal Away is a really good removal spell. I'm playing a white deck.
Better play some.
But like, I would compare Seal Away personally to Declaration in Stone from Shadows of Innistrad standard. Not quite the same cards, obviously. In fact, they're kind of polar opposites in terms of what they do, despite being 2-mana white spells that exile a creature. In that Seal Away is very good if you are the control deck, because if your opponent is attacking you, Seal Away is 2-mana, just like exile target creature. Whereas Declaration of Stone is not good if you're the control deck, and is exclusively good in aggro decks, because if you give your opponent the time that they can get their card back, then it doesn't play into your plan of, I am going to trade resources with you and then eventually like take over the game through card advantage, because you're not taking over the game through card advantage, you're actually losing card advantage through it. But if you're aggressive, and you can make it so that them spending 2 mana to crack a clue and draw a card is actually like really bad for them, then Declaration is just a really good card. Basically, like, I think it's a fundamental misunderstanding of the way the deck plays, and more looking at like, oh, white is good, and Seal Away is good. I will play Seal Away in my white decks.
Seal Away's out. This gives us room to play more Fatal Pushers, more cast outs. The current list has got a single Thopter arrest in it, just for these green decks that we've already touched on.
I don't think it's just for them. I also think it's better against red and mono white. I think that playing your removal suite of only Fatal Push and cast out, because currently before that we had a 3-3 split.
Yeah,
I think it puts you in an awkward position against, especially game one, against like a lot of the decks. Basically, you know how we talked about all those triple... I still haven't figured out how to say this. Triple casting costs, like creatures.
Right.
You know how they're all powerful, and you know how they're all 3 mana?
Yeah.
You know how that's this weird blind spot when your removal suite kills 2 CMC creatures or it costs 4?
Yeah.
So Thopter Arrest like kind of works to ameliorate that and have you be less of a blind spot against good 3-drops.
Shores it up a bit, and every now and then you can tag a gate before they can untap and get their stupid gift.
That's true.
Which is decent. So there's that. So as we said, we've gone up on Khan numbers, gone up to 2 Gideon. I think we kind of briefly touched on this last week, but Gideon's pretty good in the deck. Obviously plays well with Heart of Kiran and plays very well against opposing Heart of Kirans.
Yeah, he also he's another nice pivot piece. As I said, that doesn't have any card selection, but what it does have is cards that can be good in both game plans of like being more controlling and being more aggressive. And Gideon's another one of those where like, oh, my opponent isn't doing anything to me. I will make a 4/4 and hit him. Or, oh, my opponent is doing things to me. I will Icy Manipulator their creature, and then I will not hit him.
So there's that, and so I guess we also had a couple of slots, and we were thinking about cards that can.
We literally went through a list of every like 2 or 3 drop in the format in the colors.
In the colors, yeah.
I literally was like going down a big list and being like, "Hey, can we play this? No, this card is bad."
This is all while waiting Crab Rice, and we're staring at like. What's it called? Glint Sleeve Artisan. Narrowing our eyes. Just like,
well, it's because we were talking about Aethersphere Harvester and how it's bad because you don't have like a white Pia.
Yeah.
Like the reason why Aethersphere Harvester is good in like the red-black decks, for example, is because they get to play PNLR. And PNLR works really well with Aethersphere Harvester in that you get to like crew an attack with Aethersphere Harvester the turn you play PNLR and still block, potentially, if you're interested in doing that. Not with the Harvester, obviously, but like with the other creature that you didn't crew with. And often you get a PNLR kill, but you still have a crewer for your Aethersphere Harvester because she made 2 things. And she can like pump your Aethersphere Harvester such that you gain more life. There's lots of good ways that PNLR plays with Aethersphere Harvester, but there isn't a white variant of that. There isn't like a white 3 mana 2/2 make a 1/1. But there is. Haha! Bet you forgot about that, limited all-star. Glint Sleeve Artisan, 3 mana 2/2 fabricate 1. Don't play it.
Don't play it, please.
It's
Instead,
not good.
Play, drumroll.
Yeah.
Ruin Raider.
Ruin Raider is the card that I personally currently think is the truth in this deck. I've played it online. I had it to good success. Ruin Raider is like, I think exactly what this deck wants to do. Especially in game 1. But a lot of games I play with the deck, I'd find that I have trouble just seeing enough cards, because you'd see the wrong half of the deck, and you're like, I just need to see more. Just more cards.
Which is when it's those games where you're like digging with Khan, even though it's like a terribly losing proposition. You'd much rather be doing other things, but because obviously you're not going to get the card you want until the next turn, but you're just taking up with Khan because you're just thinking, I just need to see more cards. Like the only way I win this game is if I find my cast out. If I don't find my cast out, or if I don't find my post-board fumigate or something.
I need to plus one Khan. I need to plus 1 Khan this turn because I need the cast out by next turn. So this way, if I do see the cast out, I can get it back with Khan.
Right.
And so like there's a Ruin Raider kind of helps with that game plan. I think it's just a nice bridge from. It also just lets you see more cards to see more lands. Like drawing and playing lands is quite important for the deck.
It's another thing is that the 2 toughness isn't quite so much a problem because there just really aren't that many shocks going on. Even the red-black decks, they're just playing Unlicensed Disintegration and a Braid. Sometimes they play Magma Sprays, but usually in the sideboard. And it's really only the red decks that are playing shocks, which literal shock. And obviously Ruin Raider is not very good against the red decks, but against everything else, it's pretty great.
I think it's exactly where you want to be against everything else.
Mm-hmm. Accrues Heart of Kirin.
That is the big thing. Is this plays significantly better with the deck's game plans and just play patterns in general. Like, I've had games where you go Heart of Kirin into Aethersphere Harvester and you stare at your board of do-nothing rocks that you played for some reason.
Yep.
And you're just like, man, I wish I had a deck that did things. I wish I'd sleeved up cards that, like, played a game of Magic.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, like, you go Heart of Kirin to Ruin Raider, and you're like, okay, Crew Heart, hit you for 4, draw a card.
Doing things. And also cutting Lyra from the deck means that you're unlikely to chunk...
You're not going to bob yourself for 5.
Yeah.
Remember when people played Bob in Legacy? People at one point in their lives played Bob in Legacy with Force of Will.
Yep.
Which, like, because some people were just like, just like, don't draw it, just don't, like, Bob the Force of Will. And then they realized that Lava Acting themselves was, like, too much.
You can be a true lunatic, a la Wayne Dillon, and play Bob with Emrakul in your deck.
That is not... So Bob Emrakul is the highest tier of respect. I mean, you can play Bob Draco, but at that point, you're not really playing a good deck. Whereas Bob Emrakul is like, those are both powerful cards.
Yeah.
I have seen someone play Bob Grizzlebrand.
Oof.
Which, like, again, I just have deep respect for.
Yeah.
So...
No, power to you. So, Ruin Raider, standard Bob that crews Heart of Kirin is good for this deck. We are playing 2 currently. This is a kind of a recent change, which, again, this has all been determined over a couple of plates of lovely crab rice in Paisley.
Crab rice is good for your card evaluation skills.
Yeah, apparently. So that's kind of our list going forward. We'll post it. Hopefully, as we've said, neither of us will be playing standard this weekend, but in the event that we do, that is what we will be playing.
Yeah. So I still am not sure, because I actually think the deck... So this is what I want to talk about earlier was, like... Mm-hmm. I'm not sure the deck kills quick enough if you don't have a history of Benalia draw to, like, be a good aggro deck game 1.
I think... I think it does against the decks that have trouble answering Heart of Kirin. Against the decks that don't have any trouble, then... Yeah, you're right. You need you need a multiple history draw or whatever if you want to get the really, really fast guilds.
Yeah, so that's kind of what I've been thinking about, is I'm just not... I mean, this is just a general feeling about this standard, is that I haven't played a deck where I've thought, this is really powerful. And, like, I haven't played a deck where I've been like, yeah, this is a good deck. Every deck has felt kind of awkward, and, like, its draws just don't line up sometimes, and, like, everything is just kind of medium.
That's kind of what everybody's been saying at the moment. I mean, most people that you speak to are having an absolute headache because they don't know what deck to play. They don't know what's good, and they don't know, all the feelings that you just touched on. You know, why is this deck better than this deck? And, you know, why does it have all these awkward draws and things like that?
Yeah, I've chosen to, like, just kind of be like, okay, cool. I don't really have time to refine a new deck. Mm-hmm. And I don't really feel like going out and getting the cards for some random thing. So I'm just going to play this because I feel like I've put in good reps with it and I know what I'm doing with it. And it's Toolcraft Exemplar. And
yeah.
Hey, man.
And we have plans.
That card's good. Heart of Kirin's good.
The thing is the deck has a bit of a target on its back this weekend. I would say it's obviously... I'd say this and Blue-White Control are the 2 decks that have those targets. And I think that the green decks are specifically gunning for us. Obviously, they've got plans for the Blue-White Control deck, but we've touched on it earlier. Their matchup is overall bad. But, you know, they think that they can beat this Black-White Vehicles deck, and I think we're making the correct adaptations in order to kind of combat that. And we've got plans, you know, so I think that's all we can kind of hope
that's where
for.
I am.
So... Do we want to talk about any other standard decks? Do you want to touch on the red-black deck real briefly?
I don't feel like I've looked enough at this red-black deck. I'm sure it's good. I just have been like, I don't have time to switch to this.
It's very
I feel like it's very similar to what it's been, right?
Yeah, it is. It's playing a kind of a a couple of hearts, sometimes some ether spheres, sometimes it kind of, most lists are playing heart right now because they can play Chain Whirler, basically, and Chain Whirler is a good heart pilot. And the removal spells are Abrade and Unlicensed Disintegration, and then it's got the usual suspects of Bomat Courier, Walking Ballista, Scrap Heap Scrounger, Rekindling
Good
Phoenix, and Inventor's Apprentice, similar to like Jerry's list at the tail end of last format. And then the Planeswalker suite is very good in form of being able to play both Chandra and Khan, which is strong. And then the sideboard is full of Glorybringers, Sweltering Suns, Doomfalls, and Treasure Maps. It's Duresses, Magma Sprays. It's all fairly standard stuff if you were paying attention towards the end of last standard. The big new additions are Khan, Chain Whirler, and Disintegration being a good Magic card, because Abrade was still good at the time. So I think the deck is a pretty solid choice going into the weekend. I personally think it feels pretty low power. Like, I feel like a lot of your cards are just like, they're not like kind of raw power, they're kind of relative power. I think Phoenix's stock is kind of...
we did just talk about how good Seal Away was, right? And Phoenix does happen to be one of those, like, costs more than 2, has to attack to be good.
It's so polarizing.
I think it's still fine, because
me too,
there's still plenty of matchups where you just crush with Phoenix. And your opponent stares at it and goes, oh my god, I can never kill this.
I just feel like it's such a polarizing card.
Themselves.
It's just like, it's either great or it's terrible. And it's a weird one. And in the matchups where it's great, it's pretty great. Like, basically against the non-white stuff, it's decent. And Chandra's just very strong. I think that's the main reason to be playing this deck, especially with the rise of all these Steel Leaf champions and things like that. I think that it's got a lot of pivoting, similar to the black-white deck, post-board. It's got access to Ballista and these Planeswalkers that we talked about, which are good core cards in order to kind of, pivot on to adopt different plans post-board. I think the deck is good. I think it's mostly on the back of Phoenix is still good when it's good. It just happens to be terrible when it's terrible. You are a Ballista deck, which is a good thing. Chandra is strong, and Disintegration is in a good spot right now. So is Abrade. So there's quite a few good things about it. As I said, it all feels kind of relative to what's going on, rather than kind of raw power level.
I think the only decks that really get there on raw power level are probably the gift decks, but I have no idea what's going on with the gift decks, and I do not feel confident enough picking one up for the weekend.
Yeah, there's like a blue-green one doing the rounds, but so that's kind of what we're thinking going into the weekend for Standard, and based on our experiences at the PPTQs last weekend. But I feel pretty good about this list. As I said, we'll post it in the show notes. It'll no doubt have some more changes after this weekend is through and we've got some more results, but it's good to kind of have a frame of reference for when you're listening to this episode. You can see what we're thinking. Let's talk Legacy, because that is the first tournament, and the tournament which we intend on, as we said, day 2ing and making deep runs.
Day 2 this Legacy GP. Yeah.
How has your testing been going?
Pretty badly. I keep losing, partly because I am very bad at drawing magic cards that do things.
Okay.
Other than make mana. And partly because, I don't know. I actually don't know. I don't really feel like I'm making bad decisions. But
to be clear, you're playing Grixis Delver and a bit of Blue-Red Delver?
I've been playing Grixis and Blue-Red because I'm feeling like... I was in a position where I was like, do I just pivot? Do I last minute pivot onto the deck I'm more familiar with? Because I definitely have played more Blue-Red than I have Grixis. But I don't know. Playing Blue-Red, I wasn't like, oh man, this deck's much more powerful. I was like, oh yeah, this deck has its own failings as well.
And you know what you're doing with it and everything. And
yeah. I feel relatively comfortable in mirror matches. I basically just feel like every time I run into Pile or Miracles, I'm so disfavored. Miracles I know is just a bad matchup. People say Pile isn't that bad of a matchup, but it just feels very hard to win if you don't get the right draws, and it feels like their draws don't have to be that good to beat you, because they're Grixis Delver is Blue Zoo.
Yeah.
And if your opponent just draws a bunch of removal spells, then your Zoo deck isn't very good.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of what the Pile and Miracles decks are doing, is they're saying, okay, I am going to draw a lot of removal spells, and then you're going to die.
It's a large reason why they're sitting at top of the format. Like, these are the top 3 decks going into the weekend, with Grixis Delver being on top, and the other 2 sort of... I wouldn't put one necessarily on top of the other, but, I'd say that they're both in those top 3 decks.
I think Pile is above Miracles at the moment.
Yeah, it's certainly in numbers. Online.
I think you have to play Miracles quite a bit better than you have to play Pile to, like, win at a tournament.
Agreed.
Not denigrating Pile necessarily, but I think Miracles is, like, quite a technical deck that punishes misplays a lot harder.
Mm-hmm. But, both of these decks have, pretty abysmal unfair matchups.
Pile isn't necessarily that bad.
I think it crutches on him. And I think that...
I think it has him, and DRS is actually a good card in lots of unfair matchups.
Sure, okay.
And
that's fair.
Revold is a good card in lots of unfair matchups.
And a lot of unfair right now is Marit Lage, and the decks are usually playing a couple of edicts now, main deck.
A lot of unfair is now is like Marit Lage. It's either Marit Lage or it's Graveyard. Storm is kind of around, but it's not anywhere near what it used to be.
It is on the uptick, though. Online, anyway.
Sort of. I think it just goes through, like, small waves. But, like, Storm's around. It's always been around. But Tess has never been more popular than Ant. And Ant is the one that uses the Graveyard more. So Deathwatch Shaman is actually an actively good card against Ant because, like, it just makes their piff much worse. And they're actually going to piff you a lot of the time.
The deck that's kind of a bit on the rise at the moment it's kind of been on a very slow rise for the last few months, is Turbo Depths. And there's a new version that's kind of doing the rounds at the moment, which people haven't decided on a good catchy name for. So Slow Depths seems to be the one that we've gone with as a community.
They kill you on turn 4. No, they don't. They still kill you just as fast. Well, probably a little bit slower because not playing petals and maps. But yeah, it's swapping out some of the turbo pieces of Turbo Depths to play some card advantage pieces or like some kind of value-y pieces in Deathwatch Shaman and Bob. To like more consistently beat the fair decks, because if people have adjusted to Turbo Depths. If you're all in on making a 2020 and that's your only game plan, and your opponent has a Diabolic Edict or a bounce spell or whatever, you're like, oh, my 2020 is gone and I have no cards in hand, or like I have one card in hand and it's an Elvish Spirit Guide.
So all these dead guns doing the rounds at the moment, which is
Dead Gone, Diabolic Edict, all that sort of stuff. People have adjusted to Turbo Depths being good. Like I say, it was kind of a slow rise, but I think it's only slow in the context of other Magic formats. Like, in terms of Legacy, this is like pretty standard in terms of the speed at which things change.
Yeah.
And Turbo Depths has kind of like gone from being that deck where people go, oh, why don't you just play lands, to people being like, oh, okay, because it's like a really different deck.
Yeah, no, it's
doing different things.
Very, very different. This deck's kind of, a lot of people are looking at this deck and just saying, oh, why don't we just play lands? And I think the sentiment isn't entirely sort of inane. I think there's some value there.
I mostly think it is. I think that the deck is totally different to lands.
That's kind of what I was going to say. I guess the point is that, if you want to grind with the fair decks, but you also want to have access to a Marit Lage combo. But as you say, the deck is totally different. It's got a whole bunch of... I haven't got any reps with it, because I'm very keen to chat to some pilots to see what the plans are, because the deck's got a bunch of kind of so going back to the kind of Deathwatch Shaman, the Dark Confidant, all these kind of green-black value pieces. It's also playing a couple of Tarmogoyfs in the sideboard often, and a couple of like Bitter Blossoms.
So that's for like your combo matchups? Bitter Blossom probably not, but Tarmogoyf I would assume.
I think you just bring Tarmogoyf in against like Grixis though. Like, I think it'll have a hard time.
I guess the idea is to punish people, because Turbo Depths always had that kind of thing going for it, where people didn't, especially early on, didn't really have good cards for it in their sideboard. It was like, okay, I don't really want creature removal, but they did have that Sylvan Safekeeper. And especially this version is like, well, I don't really want these lightning bolts because they're very bad against 2020s, but I do want them against Bobs and Deathwatch Shamans. And if you're bringing in Tarmogoyf, then people are like, oh, I need to bring in my dismembers? Or like...
It's so weird. And there's all this jockeying, and I think that you can get a lot of points just kind of screwing with people on what you're going to do post-board. We'll post a list, but a good example one is going back to the Team Open at the weekend. Jody Keith played this deck to a 3rd place finish. Again, we'll post the deck in the show notes, but as Nathaniel said, it's not playing any petals or any maps or Into the Norths, but we've gone up on these sort of grindy elements and then post board. And I just kind of want to walk through the post board because there's a whole bunch of stuff in here. You've got your Graph Digger's Cage, pretty obvious. This one's playing a Sorcerer's Spyglass, which I've not seen all of them play. But yeah, there's some number of Tarmogoyfs, some number of Bitter Blossoms, which is very interesting because, I mean, I think a lot of Legacy has an enormously hard time with a constant stream of 1/1s in the form of Bitter Blossom or Lingering Souls. Surgicals, okay. Cabal Therapies, okay. I think Cabal Therapy plus Bitter Blossom is something.
Yeah, that's definitely interesting. I mean, you're also playing Cabal Therapy because, like, it's good against combo.
Yeah.
Well, I guess, yeah, if you're not...
Well,
this kind of deck doesn't really have that many good ways of flashing it back outside of Bitter Blossom,
but
right?
remember that they've got all the Duresses and the Thoughtseizers main deck, right? They're playing full 4 of each. So you're rarely Therapying blind.
Sure, and Therapy has this massive upside against especially other combo decks of being able to take every piece that you're playing a Storm and you like Thoughtseize them and you see like Infernal Tutor twice and you're like, oh no, I'm gonna die. But like this way, if you have a Therapy in hand, like if you don't have Thoughtseize, you just have to take both Infernal Tutors, which maybe would be good, but you still leave them with all the rest of their resources so they could rebuild.
Yep.
If you're playing with Therapy, you get to be like, okay, take your LED and go back in and take both Infernal Tutors, and then your opponent is just like stone dead.
Stone dead. And this is the thing, is that right after we had this conversation, it's that kind of thing where it's like, well, Therapy and Bitter Blossom might not even be for the same matchups. Maybe you're never having that interaction. It's really hard to say. Like, I'm really intrigued by these plans, basically, because there's so much stuff going on in here. Let's round it off. You've got Dread of Night, which, I mean, yeah.
Dread of Night is the dumbest card.
Yes.
It's literally just like, I can't beat Death and Taxes. I guess I'll put this in my sideboard.
We were testing them in the shop last night, and Leandro was playing against Holt, and I think Holt landed a Rest in Peace. So Holt's playing Death and Taxes, and Leandro's playing his Reanimated Depths, which we talked about on last episode with Jaren. And Holt's got like a Rest in Peace in play, and Leandro's got a Dread of Night in play, and neither of them are doing anything. And Holt's just got all these Exons in his hand, and then I think he eventually wins the game by like hard casting Batterskull or something. But Dread of Night is a stupid Magic card. And yeah, obviously it's for D&T. Then there's a Croson Grip, which is
there aren't even any other white decks in the format. It doesn't have any breadth.
I mean,
it's just no D&T. Can't beat it.
I don't think
what mental decks are you bringing Dread of Night in against?
I don't know. I'm just like,
are you really bringing Dread of Night against Miracles? And the Miracle Father just looks at you and is like,
okay,
yeah, buddy. That's fine. That one's good. Play Jace.
So
no, my angels are 3/3s now.
Croson Grip. Again, pretty obvious. We've got a Mazavith and a Caracas in here for kind of utility lands, because we're still playing Crop Rotation. Sylvan Scry main, that's still a depth deck. And then there's this Marsh Casualties, which again is sort of very complementary to the, I don't know, playing this.
It's really good with Bitter Blossom.
Mid-range.
You can target yourself.
Yes.
And kill all of your tokens.
Obviously. And
that way you've lost a lot of life and a lot of time of tokens.
Right. So anyway, deck's interesting. Pretty known entity. Not pretty known entity, sort of rising star, if you will. And some people are very dubious about it.
It's good against Grixis because Grixis only really has 4 cards to really properly interact with it in the main deck, which is the 4 Wastelands. Counter Magic is sometimes good against it, but often bad because
you play Hexmage.
They just always draw it. They just always draw the Thespian stage. And
also, they have 8 discard spells, and
that's the other thing. Yeah, they just Thoughtseize your counter magic, and then they go off. And obviously, you can't Thoughtseize Wasteland, which is kind of the big thing for the deck. But they're also playing Pithing Needle for that. But like those are your 4 good cards. It's like your 4 wastelands, and then your like clock pieces, and that's really what you're doing. And so you kind of prey on Grixis a bit with that, and then you kind of like fine to bad against other things. I think, like Swords to Plowshares decks, you're obviously quite poor against. Caracas decks, you're very poor against. Bob and Deathwatch Shaman obviously kind of help there, but I don't think they're exactly going to set those matchups on fire. And be like, haha, I have defeated you, Swords to Plowshares deck, because I played a 2-mana 2/1.
Well, the best card for that is probably just Safekeeper, huh? But,
yeah, Safekeeper is definitely the best card against Swords to Plowshares decks.
Safekeeper,
but Diabolic Edict decks, I can imagine you are a bit better against, because like nobody's really a Diabolic Edict deck, right? But they sometimes play it in their main deck. They play like 2 copies. So then you can actually make them run out of those and like grind them out of the game and make enough 20/20s. Whereas against Swords to Plowshares decks, I think you have difficulty making enough 20/20s.
Yeah, agreed.
Especially the ones that are also playing Terminus. Or again, Caracas. Like that card seems pretty hard to beat.
Yep. Absolutely. So that's that deck. Oh, to be clear, actually, on recent results, it also won Eternal Weekend. And beat Death and Taxes in the final. And I think that there will have been some amount of post-board jockeying there. I need to go and watch the tape if there is any. But we just want to talk about this deck.
I imagine you're really bad against Storm on the draw too, right?
I mean,
like on the play, maybe you get to Thoughtseize them and that does something. But on the draw, like they Thoughtseize you, or like they duress you, and you're like, oh no, please don't take my Thoughtseize. Oh no, he took my Thoughtseize. That's the worst news. I had the combo in hand, but he's going to kill me. Yeah,
this is what you're doing here with this version of the deck. You are giving up a lot of points against the Storms of the world, against the unfair decks, in order to play this kind of funny game with the fair decks, where you've got these other plans that allow you to win the game. And we touched against the Plough fair decks, how that might not be such a great proposition, but against all this kind of Grixis mess, and by that I mean Delver, Pile, the Grixis control decks, all this kind of stuff, and even the bug decks, I would say, this looks pretty good. So yeah, it won Eternal Weekend. We'll post these lists. Let's go back to your prep, and kind of round things off there. So you're hesitating between Blue Red Delver and Grixis Delver, is what you're saying. You should be playing Grixis. I think that, maybe we've had some dodgy results online recently. I can kind of get that where you're coming from there. But what's your thoughts?
So mostly it's that like I'm much more comfortable playing Blue Red, and also you get way luckier playing Blue Red.
Price of progress.
Well, kind of, but just like top deck the Fire Blast or top deck the Chain Lightning and kill your opponent. I had that happen a lot in my league. Of just like, partly because the deck is built to do that. It has 9 burn spells in it, and obviously like it's sort of a burn deck, so that it's less than burn, but you still top deck the burn spell relatively often, because if you're not top decking the burn spell, you're probably top decking a cantrip, and you know what those do.
You burn spells.
And I've just felt like Grixis Delver is like very attacked right now, especially online. It's possible this isn't as true in paper, because it's impossible to metagame properly for paper. But I feel like every time I sit down against an opponent, they're like playing some deck where I'm like, oh, this is explicitly tuned to beat me.
Yeah, I mean,
like, hey, they're playing like multiple Abrupt Decays and like a Loam Engine with Wasteland and like Knight of the Reliquary. Okay.
Maverick's really been on the uptick, actually.
I think it was Aggro Loam I played against, but
Aggro Loam will do that.
It's just like a bunch of cards where I'm like, man, this is really good against me. Oh, this deck plays Thalia and Chalice and Knight of the Reliquary and Dark Confidant and Life from the Loam and Wasteland.
Yeah.
I don't know how I beat those cards.
It's tough.
I feel like I face that a lot.
Yeah.
And maybe it is just my experience of online. It's that, or it's Miracles or Pile. And we just talked about how I've like had a lot of difficulty in those matchups. And I'm just kind of like, man, why am I playing like a straightforward fair deck when I could play like basically a burn deck and just kill people?
Yeah, you've got an affinity for that deck for sure. Maybe you should play
like
Blue Red
killing
Delver. I just think that maybe you might be audibling just based on what's happening online, I guess.
Probably. I probably will play Grixis, and I'll probably just play Bob's list and just be like, okay, Bob Hwang is good. He knows what's going on. This list is like, it's not difficult. Just kill people and don't brainstorm like a fool.
Yep.
And
good things will happen to you.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And like, it's not like Grixis is like not a just kill people deck. And playing Gurmag Angler is really good against like a random room.
Yep. Gurmag's great.
The card is real good in Legacy if people aren't playing Swords to Plowshares.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I do love Cabal Therapy. That card is a sick Magic card.
Yeah, Cabal Therapy is really cool. Makes you feel real smart when you get things right.
So it makes you feel real smart when you get things right blind, and then sometimes you get to cheat and just play Gataxian Probe.
Oh, I hate Probe so much.
It's such a poorly designed Magic card.
So bad.
Like, I cannot believe Phyrexian Mana got all the way through design, and then all the way through development, and then all the way to release, without people being like, this is insane. What are we doing?
Get Probe.
Why did we print a colorless removal spell? Why did we print a colorless counter spell? Why did we print a colorless peak?
Yeah.
Stop doing these things.
It's pretty
Why
stupid.
did we do this?
I always forget about Misstep.
Was such a poor set. I never forget about Misstep, man. Misstep is, I think, in my opinion, the worst designed card in Magic history.
I mean,
and I will
so.
take fights on that one.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it very well could be both.
I could probably do a podcast on how bad Misstep is.
I mean, maybe we could put that in
put that one at the end of the line. Yeah. Put that one way at the end.
When we're really, really desperate. So I'm playing Rug. No surprises there. I've been jamming a lot online recently.
Stifling people.
I bought True Names a few weeks ago. Bit the bullet, and I've had a pretty good time actually. I've not got the elusive 5-0 this week, but I got a bunch of 4-1s in a row, and I'm feeling pretty good. I've got pretty good plans with everything, and yeah, getting real comfortable. We've got a Canadian Discord, which is going very well.
Dan made the Canadian Discord. It's his little community of like weird stifle addicts.
Yeah, boy. And it's good actually. It's been really good because we've got it. It's just good to have people to run things by. It's good to have kind of many people at the same time testing slots and things like that. And I've made a lot of adjustments to my list and sideboard plans just based on discussion that's been had there. So feeling good, feeling confident, and yeah, I'm really excited. I've not been. I mean, I'm always hyped for tournaments. Actually, I'm just very, very hyped for this one. And we'll be driving down in the car by Jaren tomorrow, which will be great.
Yeah. Is it just us three? Because I know Holt isn't able to do it anymore. Did he ever find a replacement?
I think I'm not sure actually. Well, no, we'll ask him later. But
well, I guess we'll literally find out tomorrow.
Yeah. But yeah, it'll be a good road trip, and yeah, get into the venue, maybe do some vendors and things like that, and then yeah, and then play some Legacy on Friday.
Yep. I'm in the exact opposite space to you. You're super hyped for this event. I am like almost the opposite of hype.
Is that just based on testing and things like that? Are you not just...
Not just that. I basically just have been like... I've had a lot of very bad results recently.
Mm-hmm.
In general in Magic. And I have not... I just kind of like... At the moment, I'm feeling like, man, maybe I'm really bad. Maybe I've put so much work into this game and I still suck. And I mean, I've paid for this event and I've bought back my accommodation, so I will go and play it. But I am not expecting anything out of it, and right now I just feel like I get outplayed every time I sit down. And I'm not even sure I'm getting outplayed, but it feels like that, if you know what I mean.
No, I think you're just on the bad end of just a whole chunk of bad variance.
And like, I'm hoping that's the case. I'm hoping that I can actually win games of Magic when I put my mind to it. But,
you can.
It's just like right now I'm just like, man, alright, I guess I'll play Magic this weekend. Hope I don't end up feeling terrible about myself. That would be good.
Yeah. But it's Legacy. You love Legacy.
I do love Legacy, but you know what I really love? I really love Chain Lightning.
Yeah, Chain Lightning's pretty good. Maybe you should play Blue Red Delver. We can talk about it in the car. Bring your cards.
I'm probably not going to. I will bring the cards. I will definitely bring in the cards, but I probably won't Audible.
No,
but I might.
Bring the cards.
My best result recently was playing Death and Taxes with Holt.
Oh god,
we 4-1.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, it was the night before.
Nice.
We 4-1. We lost to Mono Blue Omnitel, which is a tremendously bad matchup for Death and Taxes. But everything else, like, I was like, oh man, this deck kind of makes sense. Like, just killing people, but in a way that's disruptive. I like disruptively killing people.
I think
like, that's blue red, and that's kind of Grixis too.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's interesting. Obviously, I think we touched on in previous weeks D&T's place in the meta right now, but after thinking about it, I do think it's not. Obviously, not in the best position it's been in a while. I don't think it's
nearly as bad as everybody says it is.
Exactly. That's what I was going to say.
Everyone's all on this like, Stoneforge Mystic is bad because Culligan's Command is a card. and you just shouldn't play Death and Taxes because it just gets beaten by all these other decks. I'm like, actually, Death and Taxes is currently built can outvalue a lot of things. Like, we played against Miracles, and I felt pretty good against Miracles because almost everything we play has to be answered. And, like, you can make them have to Terminus. Like, Grixis, it's really hard to make them Terminus. But in Death and Taxes, you get to be like, okay, I'm going to have one creature and a mom.
Yeah.
Or, like, one creature and a piece of equipment.
Yeah.
Or, like, and, like, Batterskull is such an absurd card against them. And you just have so many, like, good ways of generating advantage and of getting around, like, and negating their answers that, like, it felt actually quite favourable as a matchup.
For sure.
Despite being a creature deck against a sweeper deck. And then, like, you play against a bunch of... We played against, like, Oops All Spells, which I'm not sure actually is a favourable matchup. I think that sounds pretty bad for D&T.
Yeah.
We did beat him. I think mostly he beat himself because he's playing Oops, but, you know.
There you go.
And we played against, like, Storm, and, like... You know what beat Storm?
Thalia, Guardian of Thraben.
Thalia, Guardian of Thraben, and, like, Aethersworn Canonist. These cards are really good against Storm. Actually, we ended up winning because our opponent... in Game 3, went for... I think... we won Game 1. We lost Game 2. Our opponent was on the play. We, like, resolved a Thalia turn 2. Our opponent untaps Echoing Truth, sits, plays a Lotus Petal, goes off, kills us.
Oh, man.
And then... But our opponent in Game 3, he went for it on turn 1. Like, we said Plains Pass. Actually, we might have said Plains Ether Vial Pass. Yeah, we went Plains Ether Vial Pass. Our opponent went, okay... like, blah, 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 ad nauseum. But he fetched ad nauseum off of an Infernal Tutor. So we got to Surgical as Infernal Tutors, and he, like, drew 30 cards.
Well, I mean, yeah. I mean, he just has to hit so...
So he has to find Tendrils, because we looked through his deck and he had taken out his Dark Petition. So now he just has to find Tendrils to win the game.
Yep.
And he goes down to, like, 2 life and doesn't find Tendrils. And then we have a few, like, tense... He, like, discards our entire hand, and then we have a few tense turns where he's, like, desperately trying to find his Tendrils. But then he also... But then we, like, managed to get a Sanctum Prelate on 1 down, because we had an Ether Vial. And our opponent can't really beat that, because he has to cast 10 spells and a Tendrils of Agony.
And he's already used
without
Echoing
access
Truth.
to 1 CMC spells.
Yeah.
Echoing Truth was game 2. But, like, yeah, I don't know. Like, Death and Taxes made sense and was good. And I was like, man, why can't the other decks I play feel like this? I definitely do not. I definitely have the ability to pivot onto Death and Taxes. That's
that's pretty
beyond my abilities.
Yeah.
To magically conjure up 4
I think things are being overstated in terms of D&T at the moment. As I said, I don't think...
The death of Thalia has been greatly overstated, in my opinion. I think people are still on this, like, Death and Taxes is just not a good deck right now train. But, I think if you can play it well... I mean, it's standard Legacy, right? If you can play it well, it's going to be, like,
you'll do well.
And good.
So that's been our kind of... our ramble about our prep for the weekend. Mixed levels of confidence and enthusiasm, apparently. But, I'm sure we'll all have a good time.
It'll be good, but I'm just not expecting it to be good.
That way you can't be disappointed, right?
I mean, I guess that's. I'm going to be honest. It's actually a terrible approach to take to life.
I was going to say that.
Right now.
Anyway,
it's where I am right now.
Okay. On that wonderfully positive note, Follow us on Twitter, guys. I'm at Danzaru, and Nathaniel is
at IronsideF.
Yep.
I tweeted about. Well, I've been retweeting stuff from the team. I retweeted the podcast stuff, and I also retweeted my article that got put up about deck building with Khan, which some of it will be familiar to people who've listened to the podcast, but it is, I think, personally worth a read because I think it's interesting, and I tried to make it entertaining. You know, that's kind of my life, is trying to make things entertaining. But
the Khan Father.
I think we did it well. Deck building with the Khan Father. If you heard Jaren last week and you thought, what a beautiful man, I want to follow more of what that man does, then him and team captain Holt Hauser put up a video called What's the Best Combo Deck in Legacy Part 1 Belcher. I think the series actually is called What's the Best Combo Deck in Legacy, which is actually quite worth watching, and it is quite funny to watch those two play Belcher through a league. So if you want more Legacy content, that is Legacy content available for you right now on YouTube.
So murphysvault.com is that's a website. We've also got a WordPress, which we'll put in the show notes, and we'll put links to all these videos. Jaren's also got a new series about Burn.
Jaren loves Burn.
Jaren loves Burn. He plays a lot of Legacy Burn. The combo deck series, I think they're going to be every episode just going through different combo decks and stuff like that. Have they finished that one?
They finished episode 1.
Okay, right, cool. That's the only one I watched.
But they haven't finished the whole series. They didn't go through every combo deck in Legacy in one episode.
Right.
There's plenty more.
Ambitious. And Jaren's got a series on Burn, so check that out.
Called Slow Burn.
Slow Burn.
Jaren Dunnerr.
He's going through different burn builds and stuff like that, and talking about cards, and just generally giving you an insight into playing it in Legacy. It's weird, actually. It's not as straightforward as I would have thought at all. And Jaren's really good at it, so check it out. Murphy's Vault is Vault Murphy on Twitter. So check them out. We have a team
Twitter now as well. We have Team Vault 2016.
Yeah, we need to change that.
We feel very current with that tagline.
I think we made that when the team was created and haven't used it since, but we definitely need to change the handle. Definitely need to change that handle. So we'll get on that. But all of this stuff will be in the show notes. Any closing thoughts, Nathaniel?
I am looking forward to after this weekend when, instead of jamming Magic Online and feeling terrible about myself, I can just play Mountain Blade on my computer and be like, man, this doesn't make me feel terrible.
Okay.
This is just fun.
Okay, you're going to have a good tournament this weekend, and you're going to come back on next week's episode full of...
I'll be on next week's episode come rain or shine.
Yeah.
But I cannot promise that I will be a shine.
Hopefully you will, and we'll come back with a bit of cash and some points.
That would be sick. That would be the ideal.
Yeah. So,
well, no, the ideal would be winning the whole thing, but we're gonna temper our expectations with maybe making day 2 and getting our money back from standard.
Yeah, that'd be good.
It's kind of like cashing, right?
Okay, guys. On that note, thank you so much for joining us on this episode. You've been fantastic.
Are you gonna do your sign off, Dan? I thought we agreed that was the sign off now.
I've actually forgotten what it is.
Dan, I'm so disappointed in you.
Oh, that's it.
We've been from the vault, and you've been fantastic.